Well, today we're joined by the publisher of HuskerOnline.com, Sean Callahan, as we talk Husker football as Nebraska will try again as they'll open up this Saturday afternoon against Colorado. Sean, as always, thanks a lot for the time.
Hey, I'm here to give an extensive breakdown of Akron. Let's talk all about that game last Saturday, Jayson.
That might be a little tough. Now, last week we talked about how Saturday night was going to be so memorable and everyone would remember it. Little did we know how right we were.
Yeah, it was unbelievable in a lot of respects. It's like being at a big Broadway production and they came out with the opening act that knocked you off your socks, and that was the tunnel walk, and then all of a sudden they just stopped the show at that point, and that's what it felt like. We got this big production out of the gates, the new tunnel walk, Scott Frost coming out, one play, a touchback, and boom, that was all we got to see. And I think mentally it's hard to kind of grasp for the players, the coaches, but they've surprisingly have come back, I think, strong this week with their focus level. You know, I think it helps they practice in the mornings. I mean, here by Tuesday at 11 a.m., they had 2 practices already in the books, so they can kind of get beyond the emotions of what Saturday was, having the high and then having it all taken right away from you like it ended up being.
There's been some talk of them trying to find a 12th game, either at the end of the regular season if they're not involved in the Big Ten title game or on their bye. Realistically, what do you think the shot of that is?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because I have a hard time seeing them playing on their bye week, and I think the options are so limited. You're not going to get a Power 5 team. It would have to be somebody that you could pay to come in, and there are very few teams or some scenarios where you could get some people to move some things around to make that happen, but I still don't see that happening. I think the December 1st one is the more realistic one, whether you get somebody that plays like Hawaii. If you play at Hawaii, you're allowed to play an extra game, so like a UNLV or somebody that could be available to want to come in. And I think it only would happen if Nebraska needs that game to be bowl eligible. But they have said they want to give the players their 12 games this year. That could be Akron. The one negative, though, I see, Jayson, is if you play December 1st, you lose a very important week of recruiting. You get 3 weeks in November and December to go out and close on your December class. You would lose a week of that to play that game. But if it meant going to a bowl game, I think it would be pretty important. So there's a lot of speculatives, and I'll be curious how long Nebraska kind of goes before they make a decision on that 12th game.
And you really wanted that game against Akron to kind of work out the kinks before they take on what should be a decent Colorado club. How big of an advantage of that do you think that is for Colorado, already having played a game? And it sounded like they played pretty well against CSU.
Yeah, it is an advantage. I mean, they've been able to kind of shake off that opening rust. Steven Montez, their quarterback, threw for over 330 yards and 4 touchdowns, and their opener ran for another. So they've got a veteran offense with receivers and a few backs and a quarterback, I think, now that started 16 games in his career. He's played in well over 20. So they've got some advantages coming into Lincoln. They're not going to be thrown off by the atmosphere. They've got a lot of veteran guys. Now, they didn't have a great season a year ago, but we know 2 years ago this is a Colorado team that played for the Pac-12 title, losing to Washington in the title game. And you know, they've got a good coach in Mike McIntyre, and I think having that one-game advantage, if you're going to say anything, is by far the biggest thing they've got coming into Lincoln right now.
Now, there's certainly been some positives with Nebraska changing conferences and going to the Big Ten, but one of the downers was we lost games like this that people our age were used to seeing. First time in 8 years that Nebraska squares off against Colorado. It's great to see back on the schedule that the Huskers will take on the Buffaloes.
Yeah, you think about all our friends in western Nebraska, places like Ole's and whatnot. For years and years, they got that Russian Nebraska crowd that would come out there for that game. And we haven't played Colorado now 8 seasons, so this will be fun to have it in Lincoln. And then Nebraska goes out there. They'll play 4 times, Jayson, over the next 7 years on the schedule. So we're going to get a lot of Colorado-Nebraska talk. I think it's going to be even more fun next year to see how many Nebraska fans make that trek out. I'd imagine we're going to see over 20,000 Nebraska fans in Folsom Field in Boulder for that game. And I think we'll see a good number of Buffalo fans come to Lincoln, especially the traditionalists, the ones that really remember the 90s and, particularly the 90s. I mean, the 80s brought a little bit of history, but I think we'd all agree the series history, I felt like, ran from about 1990, 89 all the way up to, you get in that early 2000s, the 01 game was really the beginning of the end for Nebraska football as far as being on the map of relevancy. Since that game, they haven't been they've been in the top 5 1 week in the rankings since that 01 loss in Boulder that day. So there is a lot of good history when you kind of study these two programs.
What kind of a recruiting weekend will this be for the program this Saturday?
It's still coming together, but a lot of their commits are using this weekend to be an official visit weekend. Chris Hickman from Omaha Burke will be here on his official, so that will be a big opportunity to close out on the other in-state guy they want. They've got 4 committed. Hickman's the 5th they want. So if they could get him in the boat or at least kind of move him this weekend, Nick Henrich's teammate's going to be here as well. So you have a number of the commits in town as well as Chris Hickman and some other guys.
Sean, as always, we appreciate the time. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, Jayson, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sean. That was Sean Callahan, the publisher of HuskerOnline.com, joining us today. I'm Jayson Jorgensen.